Squire of Hell. By Troy Maverick. Chapter 19. Faye had a little mana left over to heal Pochi's injured wing as well. Meilais told her that the more she leveled up, the stronger her specials would be, hence, the less mana that'd be required to use them. Once the admirable wyvern was good to go, he sprung up on his feet, and ran laps around all of us in excitement. Meilais mentioned that he was still young, about a year old, and acted accordingly. He was like a big baby, one that admired Faye quite a bit. Meilais then gave him a command to shrink back. It was a good call. Pochi wasn't exactly well hidden, and we needed to keep our heads down for a while as we recuperated. That gave Pochi plenty of snuggle time with his surrogate mother. And after she confirmed he was all right, I went back to distracting myself with more pressing matters, like, where the hell were we? Granted, us landing here was a result of escaping. This marked the first time I fled a fight. It was hard, but I had to play it smart. We were headed to Bido, but our first demons were from Regadon. I had to expect more regional demons being in Lithenia alone, which meant various types of demons and their predispositions to deal with. Wrath and fury were no joke. It encouraged Rodon's persistence to kill us, even after he'd been blinded. Fortunately, Pochi dropped quite a distance away from him, allowing me and my party to introduce ourselves to the 3 women we rescued. I didn't get a chance to appreciate how diverse they were. I gathered that they were related to each other, maybe even sisters. One of them had long pink hair, with straight horns shooting right up from her forehead, and a curled thin tail. She was the shortest of the 3, and seemed like the most timid as she stood there with a retractable personality. The other one had short messy black hair, and looked like the youngest out of the 3, with features close to a dragon's. She had scales up her sides and along her calves. Unlike her 2 other sisters who had fair skin, her skin was a velvety pink, with a noticeable shine under the sunlight. And lastly, the taller one, who also looked like the oldest. She was a buxom and built figure with green eyes and long wavy red hair in thick braids that reached down to her hips. She had 2 very large downward curving horns that protruded from her head and curled backwards, with low pointed cow ears contrary to her sisters who had pointed elf ones. From what I could tell, she was a more humanoid-looking Minotaura, with red fur just above her knees down to her clacking camel toe hooves. She even had a long cow tail. It wasn't until she approached me up close did I realize exactly how tall she was. Meilais was the shortest girl I'd met so far in Relo Hell, and Faye was a few inches taller than her. But this girl was even taller than Faye with her heels on, at about my height. And I was standing at 6'2". She took my hand, and stroked her thumb along my crest. She stared at it, almost as if she was in some type of disbelief, before she picked her head up to me. My stomach tumbled, the feeling of flutters catching me by surprise. She was as beautiful as she was strong, my pulse gravitating to her unique aura.
The legend is true?
She asked me, in a warm earthy voice. Seems like it, I answered her with a gentle smile. I'm here to help Lady Lust in this war. And it looks like she could really use all the help she could g. I grunted, the Minotaura scooping me up unannounced. She lifted me up from the ground with her muscular arms, giving me an appreciative squeeze.
My thanks, great and handsome blood squire.
Ugh, her grip was incredibly tight. Her sisters knelt before me.
We are forever grateful, blood squire,
they said in unison, and then she dropped me down with a huge smile on her cute face. That's not necessary, I panted, trying to catch my breath. It was strange to see them bowing to me. The girls in the castle had an, hungrier approach, while their formal greeting was most refined for a noble. I guess I should be counting my blessings. How about you instead give me your names? Mine is Knives Arleon. This here is Meilais the Ranger, and Faye the Priestess.
My name is Amara. My middle sister Kronii, and my youngest sister Tezera.
They tipped their heads respectfully.
We are 3 warrior sisters, floating about locally to assist in this war, to maintain our land.
Thank you so much for saving us, Blood Knight,
the younger sister with the dragon scale said to me, before rushing over to plant a thank you kiss on my cheek.
And the rest of his party.
Amara followed, turning over to my 2 girls.
You are most welcome,
Meilais said, before springing up behind me and yanking my shoulders back. Amara tilted her head to Meilais as my hand slipped from hers, flashing Meilais a smirk as she read the cat girl's subtle message.
You are fellow Lithenians. It is our duty as warriors to protect our people and take back all the things our enemies have taken from us.
That it is.
Amara followed humbly.
It's too bad we couldn't even loot those dirty bastards. But before we do anything else, we need to find you somewhere safe until a peacekeeper is on guard to bring you to safety.
Absolutely not.
The shy one, Kronii, cried.
We can't leave Mother. They left her bleeding to death. She could still be alive.
Her voice was shaken, her other sisters looking back at her distraught. Finally, Amara walked up to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. She looked down at her sister sympathetically, and confessed,
I'm sorry, Kronii. Our mother is gone. You saw the state those savages left her in. She didn't make it.
Kronii swatted her sister's hand off of her.
Do you doubt our mother's will? She has faced worse adversaries. You must give it to her strength to believe she is still there, depending on us to get her help. I will not shame her faith in us by turning around and being selfish by saving only ourselves.
I am only being realistic with you, Kronii.
Then stop it. Leave no one behind, wasn't that what you said to me? Our mother shouldn't be an exception. I don't care what the odds are saying.
She has a point, I said. This Kronii girl sharing the same code as I, leave no one behind. I'd been going by that motto for years, and I was in no position to abandon it now. I'd made the court a promise that I intend on keeping. You are of Onessa's nation, and so is your mother. So whatever the risk, we'll go back and get her. Face down in her own pool of blood, that was what Amara said to me as we took the lead on foot, heading back to her town which wasn't too far from where Pochi had landed. The condition of her mother sounded grim, those Regadon soldiers slicing her up as she tried to protect herself and her daughters. From what I collected from Amara, they'd tapped out their mana bank earlier when trying to defend town lines. When Regadon pushed back with more soldiers, they retreated, gathering as many survivors as they could. But Wrath's demons were relentless, terrorizing in larger numbers. The girls went back home to snatch their mother, but their enemies were crawling in from the rear, and they found their mother trying to defend on her own. The battle ran short. Once Wrath's men realized they were weakened, they took them for keeps, leaving their dying mother for vultures. I had a hard time listening to the story, flashbacks of walking in on my slaughtered parents fighting to traumatize me. I kept strong for Amara and her sisters, because these girls needed their blood knight. And there was no telling what we'd walk into when we got there.
Wait a minute. We are closing in on Zedra,
Maylai said. The area itself wasn't as barren and dry as the first place Faye and I had dropped in. There was scarce vegetation, enough for maybe a limited population. As for enemy forces, it looked like they'd taken what they wanted and left, signs of a struggle still fresh. I could hear Tsundere trying to hold in her tears, before picking up rushing feet behind me. Kronii zipped right by me and her sister, rushing toward a cabin along the foggy horizon.
Kronii, wait.
Amara shouted, following after her sister.
Mama! Mama, we are here.
Kronii cried, and once the rest of us reached them past the shattered front door, we saw a gray-haired woman huddled on the bloody wooden floor.
Pothley?
When Maylai spoke her name, my chest went tight. The woman who was supposed to gift me her sword was their mother.
Are you gonna help me up or just stand there staring at an ol' hag bleedin', her guts out?
She sassed. The grit in this woman's tone despite her grave condition was admirable.
Mother, please, don't talk.
Tsundere said as she rushed over to her, cradling her head on her lap while Kronii gathered more cloth for her gaping wound. She had a huge gash on her side that wouldn't stop bleeding, the fade in Pothley's eyes calling out to us. She was in shakes, her body drenched with sweat. Faye took initiative, dropping on her knees to the elder woman. She placed her hand on her side, the glowing from her healing magic captivating the room.
A healer in the Blood Squire's party.
Pothley mumbled, looking over at my hand.
Well, this truly must be my lucky day.
It was a long night. After Faye had healed Pothley, her daughters insisted she rested. It was strenuous for her to have kept herself alive for so long. I'd seen wounds like that more times than I could count, and they were no different for demons. More and more, I understood how important it was having a white mage around, especially in an area such as this. There were little resources left, with less and less people around to protect the streets of Lithenia. I'd be lying if I said that the idea of saving them all didn't start to weigh down on me, our first hours outside of the castle showing me just how bad things were. We ate dinner courtesy of Tsundere. She had to fight Maylai's off the stove a couple times from cooking for me. The cat girl could be very jealous, you'd think that she was from Envy's nation. But all she was really doing was keeping me all to herself, and making sure that no other woman could get to me. I hated to break it to her, but we were in the land of lust. Sooner or later, I was going to have a band of women. That wasn't to say that I arrogantly waited in anticipation for that time to come, it was just the reality of things, and I wouldn't turn an eye to it. I'd told myself for years that I couldn't get attached, and that I was afraid of someone's clothes being used as a weapon against me. I didn't want her getting hurt, or worse. But now, I was doing little resisting in the land of monster girls. Maybe they got me in their love spell, their praise, appreciation, and admiration breaking me down bit by bit. It was a lost battle before it was fought, and frankly, I was okay with my first ever loss. With the reassurance that her mother was going to recover, Kronii was more compelled to act within her nature. It turned out that she was the frisker of her sisters, and didn't restrict herself to timid gawking at the dinner table. She'd made her interest in the blood Squire known, and I didn't stop her from romancing me a bit by sitting next to me and stroking my leg under the table. She might have crossed the line for my Saria when she started feeding me and pampering me with kisses along my neck, Meilai's wedging herself in between us halfway through our meal. After dinner, I was looking to retire for the night. I said my farewells, and began walking to the chamber that was assigned to me. When I turned into the hallway, I noticed Meilai's lingering by the front of my door. She must have thought that I was inside, the nightstand candlelight illuminating over her feet. For some reason, she was hesitating, holding her fist up for a few seconds, before she finally decided not to pay me a visit. Meilai's, I called out to her, making her jump. She pivoted, with her hand over her chest and a nervous smile on her startled face.
Knives. I didn't hear you.
I've always been pretty light-footed. Part of the trade. You wanted to see me.
And no. I just wanted to tell you good night.
I smiled. Really? Was that why you were stalling in front of my door?
Yeah, I was.
She said, her tone making my chest stammer. Suddenly I noticed Meilai struggling to hold her tears back, and when she turned around to rush out, I snatched her by her wrist. May, I said warmly. You came to talk to me, right? So let's talk.
I'm sorry,
She said, huddling against my chest.
I didn't mean to cry.
You are allowed to have emotions, May. Come in, I said, inviting her into my room and closing the door behind us. She sat along the edge of my bed where I joined her, Meilai's having a hard time with being vulnerable around me. I get it, she was supposed to be the cheery high-spirited one out of us three. And me seeing her like this must have felt out of place.
I wasn't expecting to see him again so soon.
She whispered softly, fumbling with her thumb over her lap.
Rodon nearly killed me along with my old squadron. I barely made it, a peacekeeper bringing me to the castle for help. I was ready to die, Knives. And when they patched me up, I felt guilty for being the only one who had survived the raid.
I couldn't imagine what you felt running into him again. But you handled it well. You were brave, May.
It was a mask I had to wear.
She confessed.
I didn't want him seeing me so emotionally defeated.
But you aren't physically wounded. Not anymore. You survived. Don't let that prick turn himself into your weakness. Don't give him that luxury. You look at him straight in the eyes and you promise him death. The next time we cross paths, he'll understand the suffering he had you go through. She looked up to me as she wiped the tears off her face.
But you blinded him,
She said, and I couldn't tell if she was being lighthearted with me or not.
I can't look at him straight in the eyes now.
I snickered, Meilai showing me a soft smile.
Gavin was all I had left, you know? Before he had devoted his life to protecting our goddess, it was me, Mom, Dad, Gavin, and my little sister Dawn. Little by little I started seeing what this endless war was doing to my family. It was slowly ripping us apart. First Dad enlisted into our local district military Javerta Res, and then Mom. I couldn't understand back then how they could just leave their kids to fight for a lost cause. I was young, and too selfish and ignorant. Gavin raised me and Dawn, until Gluttony's horde broke into our district, eating everyone in sight. Including Dawn.
I held my breath, her words taking me back to my own encounter with Gluttony.
Gavin tried to save her, but it was already too late. The damage was done, and I had to again watch my family surrender themselves for the cause. But after I'd lost my sister, I began to understand why they did it. Dad, Mom, Gavin. I was so angry for so long, but I finally understood. If they didn't fight for their freedom, then who would? I couldn't sit around without doing anything anymore. A fire sparked in me, Knives, a fire so hot I thought it would swallow me up.
I'm sorry, May. I understand the feeling. My younger sister Lenore was also taken by a cannibal. She gasped. Gluttony. The picture of her death is carved in my head. And whenever I feel myself incapable of pushing through, I turn to that vision, and that blaze in my chest burns hot again. To be frank with you, sometimes it's good to be angry. Sometimes it's good to crave revenge. Let that blaze inside you bring you to new heights, to the apex of your power. Don't let the enemy sap your spirit, May. That's the worst thing you can do. If you need me, I'm here. Don't be afraid to talk to me when you need someone to vent to, or a shoulder to lean on.
I'm sorry about your sister, Knives. But now I know that you can relate. It's just... sometimes I can't bear it all and I cry. I don't like feeling so weak.
Tears aren't weak. If anything, they are the opposite. They are a sign of acceptance and understanding that something is bothering you. It's an opportunity to work on fixing the imbalance in your life. I've done my fair share when I was younger, and it has helped me heal a lot.
You're my balance, Knives. Talking to you feels different. Sure, I have friends back at the capital, but sometimes I feel like they are only listening because they have to. Because there is some type of mutuality in lending an ear to each other. They hear my troubles, so I could hear theirs. It's a bit deceptive, really.
I can see why. Then again, after what I've heard thus far, I understand why they'd want that comfort in expressing themselves. You're an outlet, like they are outlets. And even though the mutuality is hollow inside, it's still something they can depend on to feel better. But you're not in the capital anymore, May. You're not running patrol by yourself outside of that safe zone. You have yourself a party, a blanket of security, and a family now. Even though the members of the family are imperfect, we stick together and support each other. Emotionally and physically.
Physically?
She blushed.
I could use some physical support, Sarian.
I snickered. Sounds like you're back to yourself again. Feeling better.
Yeah, thanks for being my stronghold, Knives,
she said, pouncing on me and giving me a hug. She dropped me on the bed with lewd intentions shimmering in her squinting eyes, male eyes flashing me a mischievous smile.
You know, I was a thief back in the day. And a pretty good one, too.
Should I feel intimidated? I asked wittily.
I wasn't a warrior for long. Before I joined our nation's great army, Rizar, I was a certified looter.
Bet walking away from the loot we had left back there was making you itch, wasn't it?
It sure did. But I'd say you are pretty good at the art of stealing as well.
How do you figure?
Because Knives. You've stolen this Nico's heart.
She leaned in and kissed me tenderly, and I kissed her back just the same. My fingers ran down her smooth skin, from her shoulders down to her round thighs. Her heart was thumping wildly in her chest, and I could tell from her jagged breathing that she was a bit nervous. However sinful the fruit, and persuasive the predisposition, she wanted to sleep with her queen's blood knight, and that was a big deal. First mate or not, I could tell that she felt shamefully unworthy. I helped ease her into it, making her relax with small suckles along her neck when I sat her up on my lap. My thumb slipped under her strap against her collarbone and hooked down her chest, the hills of her supple breasts growing bigger with every heavy breath. Relax, May. You need to take me off of that pedestal, I teased her.
I'm trying, but this is my first time. And with a blood squire no less.
That didn't seem to bother you before. Where's that confidence from when you'd given me your milk?
I hadn't seen you in action yet. Back then, you were just a hot guy who was 5 levels higher than me.
I smiled. Then go back to that mentality, and let's enjoy each other.
I want you.
She begged deeply, her love-struck eyes locked on my lips.
I want you to do dirty things to me, blood squire.
My boner was knocking against the doors of her sex, and I was ready to devour my little kitten tonight. Our lips clashed again in a heated bout of passion, my hands climbing up her thighs to slip her shorts off clean. But our session was interrupted with a loud thud, so loud that the door flung right open. Male eyes shirked into me, hiding her indecency against my chest while Pochi bounced right off of my head and onto the bed. Behind him was Faye, rushing right by the doorway, the sight of us on the bed making her stop short. She'd been chasing the little rascal of a wyvern, who didn't waste a second longer hiding underneath my bed.
Oh.
Faye gasped, then darted her eyes away from us while she tried hiding that embarrassed look on her reddened face.
My apologies, but Poffley wishes to speak with you, Butcher. Immediately.